Coming up, Iowa City City Council re-elects Bruce Teague as mayor. And later, Iowa's new bills makes impacts throughout the state.
And the United States response to their attacks on Yemen.
All of that and a profile on a former veteran running for Congress, along with making sure your facts are straight.
Also, where presidential candidates are during their campaign trails and something for you to consider.
Good evening and welcome to The Update, your home for news and politics.
From the local level to nationwide, we're keeping you up to date. I'm Jordan Tovar.
And I'm Johnny Valtman. And Jordan, it's so good to be back here at The Update. We had a break, but we're back and there's a lot to go over. And as always, we're going to start off here in the Iowa City area. Jordan, what's been going on?
Well, Johnny, there hasn't been too much happening on the local politics front since we've been gone for break, but there are a few key things that happened over the break and are coming up. Current Iowa City Mayor Bruce Teague was re-elected by his fellow councilors, and Mazahir Salih was elected to serve as mayor pro tem in the same way. Both were unanimous votes of 7-0. If you're wondering why they were elected by council, Iowa City does things differently than other cities by letting the council vote to elect mayors and mayor pro tems. The Johnson County Board of Supervisors will hold its weekly work session meeting tomorrow. Board Vice Chairperson John Green has submitted a resolution for a ceasefire in Palestinian territories that will be discussed tomorrow. The resolution, if adopted, would call for an immediate ceasefire in the Middle East, Congress to authorize military action, as well as Congress overseeing all military aid from the U.S. and calling for prisoners to be released. Another topic of discussion for the council will be the creation of a Human Rights Commission for the county. Former City Council candidate Mandy Remington announced her run for the board recently, and Remington cites her experience in campaigning for Iowa City Council and wanting to make a difference in the Johnson County area as reasons for running. Certainly a lot of big things happening around the Iowa City community. And Johnny, if I'm right, there's a lot of big things happening around the state too.
Yes, Jordan, and this goes all the way back to the beginning of January for the Iowa legislative sessions and then the Iowa caucus. We'll get back to the caucus, but we're going to send it to Cara, who has more on the Iowa legislative session.
Thanks, Johnny. Starting January 8th, it was back to business in the Iowa Capitol to kick off the 2024 legislative session. This is the 8th consecutive year with Republicans in control of the Iowa House, Senate, and Governor's office. Last year, Republicans used their majorities to focus on laws surrounding education and LGBTQ+ rights. This year, they're hitting the ground running. Here are 3 things we're keeping our eye on in the 2024 Iowa legislature. The first is tax cuts. Lawmakers passed reforms in 2022 that will gradually reduce Iowa's income tax to a flat rate of 3.9% in 2026. But Republicans are looking to expedite that process. They may even push for a rate lower than 3.9%, and Governor Kim Reynolds says she'd like to eliminate income tax altogether. But first, people need to agree on how quickly to drop the rates. At the same time, Iowa Democrats are worried about the state needing to raise sales tax to make up for the lost revenue that would accompany lower income tax rates. The second issue we're keeping our eye on is education policy. Iowa's area education agencies, or AEAs, were created to provide additional support to special needs students. However, discrepancies between the proficiencies of Iowa special needs students and those in other states have led Governor Reynolds to say she'll be auditing AEAs this year, possibly making changes to funding and staffing. However, AEA workers and many parents of school children across the state are against this and say the current system is working just fine. And the final issue we're keeping tabs on is more book reforms, which is a topic so controversial that it spurred protests on both sides statewide. The conservative organization Moms for Liberty is a major proponent of last year's book bans. However, a committee has already approved new rules changing the ban's language, so now the law explicitly states that books must describe or visually depict a sex act in order to be removed. It also gives educators more leeway when discussing gender identity in the classroom. These new rules cannot go into effect yet due to a temporary injunction. We're expecting to see a lot of developments in the coming months and we'll be sure to keep you updated. For now, I'll send it back to Jordan and Johnny.
Thanks, Cara. And Jordan, while Iowa is staying busy, it seems like the rest of the nation is telling the same story with a lot of things going on.
Yeah, Johnny, and while we were gone over the holiday break, developments were still coming out of Washington. And that's why we have DITV's Jayce Bertrand in the newsroom to give us the rundown on national news.
Thanks, Jordan. And one of the most major developments in the nation over break was the beginning of Operation Prosperity Guardian, a series of U.S.-led strikes on Houthis targets. Now, Houthis is a militia based in Yemen that has been carrying out attacks on ships passing through the Red Sea in an effort to pressure Israel into ending their strikes on the Gaza Strip. While Houthis control most of Yemen, it is important to note that they are not the official government of the country. The U.S. strikes on Yemen began in December of 2023 in response to the attacks on international ships. However, this decision from the Biden administration caused bipartisan outrage, as many saw this as yet another war under the Biden administration.
Frustration that I have with why we're in this situation is all of this could have been prevented. What we know about Iran and all of their proxies is when they get cash, it doesn't go to take care of the Iranian people. It goes to fuel terrorism, and that's what's happened. Our goal should always be, how do you prevent war? That's the number one thing. How do you prevent war? And the best way you prevent war is to deter it in the first place. That doesn't mean putting your head in the sand. It actually means showing strength.
Since the start of Operation Prosperity Guardian, the Houthis' attack on ships has not stopped, and on Friday the Biden administration admitted that the U.S. strikes were not as successful as they hoped.
Are the airstrikes in Yemen working?
Well, when you say working, are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes.
With forces in Syria and Iraq beginning to grow more vocal in their opposition to the U.S. strikes, it is unclear whether or not this may lead to a regional conflict in the Middle East. And next we're going to Washington, D.C., where President Biden signed a bill on Friday to avoid another government shutdown. This bill avoids two different shutdowns, one scheduled for January 19th and the other scheduled for February 2nd, now pushing them to March 1st and March 8th, respectively. This is all part of an ongoing battle in Congress over a full-year spending bill that has left the government divided. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson struggled to keep the further right wing of the Republican Party in line as they demanded deep spending cuts and refused to sign off on a bill that combines spending on Ukraine and border security.
The border is broken. And we can't do that just by providing additional funds that go to aid or assistance to people who come across the border. We have to secure the border. And that's what the negotiations are that are ongoing in the Senate. They're working on a bill right now.
It is worth noting that former Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy was ousted from his position after working with the Democratic Party to avoid a government shutdown in October of 2023. And a full-year spending bill has not yet been agreed upon, and that sets the stage for another battle come March. Now I'm going to send it back to Johnny and Jordan in the studio.
Now that we're all caught up on national news, Johnny, I believe you have a candidate profile for us.
Yes, Jordan. And if you remember before winter break, we talked about Iowan Republican Senator Zach Nunn. Now we're going to be talking about a potential opponent of his, Lennon Baucom. While Nunn is serving his first term, Baucom is also seeking his first term as an Iowa senator. House to the United States in the 80s, born in Mount Pleasant, Iowa. During high school, he enlisted in the Iowa National Guard. Following 9/11, he was sent to Afghanistan to be a combat engineer. Returning home, Lennon attended Drake University and served in the United States Department of Agriculture under former Governor Tom Vilsack. Part of his role in the USDA has been supporting veterans, expanding opportunities in entrepreneurship for the agriculture industry, and recently assisting in a bipartisan investment to expand high-speed internet throughout rural America. The investments will also lead to more high-paying jobs and lower costs for families across the country. Lennon's keys to his campaign include access to high-paying jobs, affordable health care, an ability to retire with dignity, and protection of women's reproductive freedom. Next week, we'll look at Baucom's opponent for the Democratic ticket. And Jordan, going from statewide candidates to nationwide candidates, there are still Republicans going for the Republican nomination to be the next president.
After the Iowa caucus last week, we saw some candidates drop out, and today we have the New Hampshire primary, and we're going to send it to Cara with some updates.
Thanks, Jordan. It's been a busy week since the Iowa caucus. We've seen dropouts, endorsements, and preparation for tonight's New Hampshire primary. To start, we've got a refresher of the Iowa caucus. Former President Donald Trump ran away with a historic margin, winning half the state. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis secured the tightly contested second place, while former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley brought up third. Meanwhile, tech entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy and former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson dropped out of the race completely after facing disappointing caucus results. Ramaswamy is one of 4 former candidates who have gone on to endorse Trump, along with North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum and South Carolina Governor Tim Scott.
We need Donald Trump. We need a president who will unite our country. We need Donald Trump.
And earlier tonight, I called Donald Trump to tell him that I congratulated him on his victory, and now going forward, he will have my full endorsement.
Then on Sunday, DeSantis became the 4th member of that group after announcing he was suspending his presidential campaign and endorsing Trump.
I am today suspending my campaign. Trump is superior to the current incumbent, Joe Biden. That is clear. I signed a pledge to support the Republican nominee, and I will honor that pledge.
This came as a shock to many after DeSantis had beaten the odds for a second-place win in Iowa. Before the caucus, he'd been projected to get third. Now, New Hampshire's primary tonight will see a former president and his former cabinet member go head-to-head. Now, since we recorded this segment, results have poured in from the New Hampshire primary, and former President Donald Trump came out as the night's big winner. Former U.S. Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley finished in second, although it appears she's narrowing the gap between her and Trump since the Iowa caucus. On the Democratic side, despite not being on the ballot, Joe Biden is the winner based off write-in votes. Second-place finisher Dean Phillips holds a sizable gap over Marianne Williamson, who took third. Johnny and Jordan, I'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Cara. And while Jayce is going to take for your consideration tonight, we're going to be taking over his fact check. And Jordan, I've seen some crazy headlines this week.
Yeah, I mean, every time I get on social media, I just see the most absolutely insane stuff online.
Well, hopefully we can try and smooth some of this out and get you guys the facts. So we're going to start off addressing a hypothetical pandemic. If you read past the headline, you'll discover that it is only a fake disease created by the World Economic Forum during their annual meeting in Switzerland. Its creation is to generate discussion and future planning in the case of the next global pandemic. To reiterate, it is not real.
Back here in the United States, claims are made that a New York high school shut down to house migrants. During the harsh winter storms, James Madison High School housed migrants for multiple days, forcing the school to close while they took refuge from the storm. The migrants were housed at the high school, but only from the evening of January 9th and then leaving in the morning of January 10th. The high school had classes remotely on January 10th and returned to school in person on January 11th.
And a hard topic to straighten out. While we were gone, documents surrounding Jeffrey Epstein and a list of names who have visited his island were made public for the first time. People are believing that the names of those who appear on the list will face legal trouble due to association with Epstein. That is not entirely true, as the list includes accusers and victims of Epstein's wrongdoings. Some on the list have come forward and specified their relationship with Epstein and having no knowledge of his crimes. And during these stories provide a wonderful reminder to always double check what you're reading, watching, writing. Just if any red flags go up, maybe it's time you should get a fact check.
It's certainly a reminder that seeing is not always believing.
And now we're going to send it back to Jayce in the newsroom, where he's going to share with us something he would like you guys to consider.
Thanks, Johnny. And while I wasn't able to do fact check this week, I am going to carry on the tradition by checking the facts on one big lie I've been hearing this election season, and that is the lie that a third-party vote is a wasted vote. This is an out-and-out lie continuously spread by both Democrat and Republicans in order to convince voters that the two candidates they churn out every 4 years are the only option, that there is only one lesser of two evils. It is true that for a while, the Democrats and Republicans have been the only two political parties receiving public funding. However, according to the Federal Election Commission, a minor party becomes eligible for funding after their candidate receives at least 5% of the popular vote. That means if only 16 million Americans vote outside of Democrats and Republicans, the U.S. officially becomes a three-party state. That's less than the total population of Ohio and Michigan combined. Furthermore, nearly 22% of current registered voters have indicated that they would vote for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. rather than Trump or Biden. Though he wouldn't win the election, if all of those registered voters did throw their support behind RFK Jr., he would receive public funding. If Kanye West received 16 million votes in 2020, then the birthday party would be eligible for funding. In conclusion, never believe that there are only two options in an election. While it's doubtful that RFK Jr. is going to win the presidential election, he may win enough votes to get public funding and end that gerontocratic stranglehold that the Democratic and Republican parties currently have on the political system. If you're a registered voter and you can't stand the idea of a Biden-Trump rematch, consider voting for the Green or Libertarian Party. Your vote may matter more than you can really imagine. And now I'm going to send it back to Johnny and Jordan in the studio.
Thanks, Jayce, and thank you for tuning in to the update tonight, where you'll find all your news and politics.
Tune in next week for more updates from the local level to the nationwide level.
From the update, it's good to be back. I'm Johnny Valtman.
And I'm Jordan Tovar. Have a wonderful night.